Hey there YouTube, I'm Yukitsu, this is Yukitsu Times, welcome to my channel, welcome to a little bit of Total War Warhammer. So we're playing and continuing along in our tournament, we're up against Nanomashoes, or something, I'm not really 100% sure I'm saying that right, but yeah, we're playing as Dwarves versus Chaos here. The map rotation is still the same, so this is why you see this as a first map all the time, but I'm pretty comfortable with the way I've been playing Dwarves, so I've kind of settled into what I think of as a meta for them. Now, we are against Chaos, so I've taken a lot more heavy weapons in this particular case, because that's what is good against Chaos. But we've got Dwarf Warriors with great weapons here. Got a nice solid lineup of that. I think we've only got like 5 units of that or something like that. We got a unit of Miners on the flank there. Actually, we've only got 4 units of those Dwarf Warriors. We got 3 of the Longbeards with great weapons, and then just 3 Dwarf Warriors as sort of security back there. Got a unit of Handgunners, 2 units of Quarrelers, Dwarf Lord, and 3 of these Thanes. And then we've got 2 Gyrocopters. So my opponent pushed forward with some Marauder Cavalry here just to try and harass me early on. Unfortunately for him, they're kind of in range of my Quarrelers, so they're taking a bit of a hammering right off the bat there. No casualties just yet, but it does take a little bit of damage. I think that this last one might kill a couple of them. No, not quite. Still, pretty good to be able to deal some damage there. Now, he has got this Hell Cannon, so that's a bit of a new thing to see in this particular setup. But we are going to go forward with our Gyrocopters with these Brimstone guns. We can't go too far forward with them because they'll get hit by these Marauder Horsemen. Very lucky that these trees get in the way of those shots there, but we do have to advance here. And we are going to head up this hill towards these Chaos Warriors here. Interesting thing about the Hell Cannon, if I did take any artillery whatsoever, like a cannon or something like that, this thing's surprisingly easy to kill with cannons. One of the easiest in the game. We are picking at the Marauder Horsemen a little bit with our Gyrocopters with Brimstone guns. I just want these guys to go away so I can more safely advance my units without having to worry about that sort of thing being around there. I think that shot finally lands. It finds itself in some regular old Dwarf Warriors. My Brimstone Gyrocopters are getting shot up a little bit. Now, strictly speaking, you'd think that these guys are not a worthwhile target, but actually they kind of are, because the per model cost of the Marauder Horseman is actually pretty high. It's pretty comparable even to something like Chosen, which my opponent has 1 unit of back here. It's not as high as Chosen, but it's a lot closer than you would sort of expect. So we are going to advance up forward here. We are going to get into a range for our guns and our crossbows, more so than we are going to be worrying about getting into range for other things. But we are going to start switching our focus fire onto these guys here. He's going to fire a fireball off. You have to overcast these, otherwise they don't do enough armor-piercing damage, and armor-piercing is how you deal damage to Gyrocopters, because they're heavy armor. So you have to overcast those. At this point in time, like the fact that he doesn't have the armor-piercing sort of missile units, the axe-throwing ones, my Gyrocopters don't really take that much damage from these guys, so I'm not too concerned about this. But we're splitting our fire, we're dealing damage to a couple of units of these Chaos Warriors with great weapons. And, like, this is huge damage that we're doing, all things considered. This is pretty worthwhile for me. Even though we're taking some damage in return, it's not really that much, and I'm not really that concerned about it. But every time we kill one of these Chaos Warriors with great weapons, it's a really big benefit for me. At this point in time, lines are going to start smashing together. And we've got a lot of units that head out towards the flanks over here. Now, my opponent forgot a unit of Chaos Knights over here in that forest over there. He does end up remembering them way later, but it's actually in some ways not that bad that he forgot about them. The reason being, of course, that if my opponent had remembered them earlier, I would have focus fired them with the Brimstone Gyrocopters, which would have been really bad for them, because these guys can tear through a unit of those Knights really quite quickly. With their high armor-piercing damage. We've gotten around behind them. I don't want to fire at my in the rear of my Dwarf units, so firing into the rear of these Chaos units is a much better idea. We're running these Dwarf Warriors back here just so that we can get into the rear of these formations somewhat. Pretty soon my opponent remembers about these guys, but we've got some Miners, we've got some more great weapon warriors heading towards the sort of flanks and rear of my opponent, and in particular we're going to get into the Hell Cannon, which will just stop it from firing. Not too important for us to do that, but we have broken through here just because of that relentless fire from these Gyrocopters helping to break through quite quickly, because the Dwarf Warriors and Dwarf Warriors with great weapons are no match for Chaos Warriors with great weapons here. I'm going to see some Searing Doom coming down here, if I recall correctly, but yeah, it's not too deadly a spell because the armor-piercing damage isn't that great on it, but it is good enough to deal some pretty good damage. Starting to spray some fire from those Brimstones into the rear of these Chosen with the great weapons here. But yeah, they're actually a really tough unit, hard to crack. I think my opponent still hasn't remembered that these guys exist yet, but they'll come into this pretty soon. Marauder Horsemen get shown off relatively soon once I'm able to stick within range with my missile units. My missile units are completely vulnerable now, but it's a little bit too late. And again, like, if he had shown those guys earlier, it would have helped in some ways, but also would have meant that they would have died pretty early. At this point in time, I'm actually pretty much out of damage with my Brimstone Gyrocopters, so we can't actually do anything to finish him off, really, with these guys here. A unit of these Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons has rallied, and unfortunately my Dwarf Warriors are still trying to attack these Marauder Horsemen, so they're sort of walking forward into them. Get some bombs off here, which were actually pretty good. Those were pretty good bombs. I'm not usually that good with these things, but pretty happy with that one. So yeah, these Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons are going to actually break against my Correlers. It's the power of Correlers, really, but I actually also was firing at them with these Thunderers, so it's pretty okay. Cannon's going to stick around because it's unbreakable. We've got lots of Dwarf units left here, so we have a pretty good opportunity to win this. The only problem, of course, is that he does have this unit of really tough Chaos Knights here. He's got his General still, he's got his Fire Wizard, although that's going to rout pretty soon here. It's interesting playing Dwarves without access to the sort of Rune Smiths or Rune Priests, being able to take two of them or whatever, because it really does let them fight things that they otherwise have a really hard time dealing with, including those Chaos Knights with Lances. So it's interesting to sort of note that. Getting some shots off against this Chaos Warrior unit that's rallying and back in here. Hell Cannon's down to 0 crew. It still technically exists, but Chosen here, holding out strong. But even they're going to start wavering at this point in time. Yeah, so my opponent did forget about these guys for a lot longer than I thought he did. But Chaos Knights with Lances is going to come out. My missile units are not really paying attention, and I'm not really paying too much attention, because I just want to make sure that I break through and don't get my general killed by their general, which is still possible. But yeah, he barrels into that at this point in time. And like, you can definitely see how this could have swung the battle potentially earlier on. But at the same time, it's hard to say, because they would have definitely taken a lot more damage earlier on. I no longer have the solutions to those in the easy sense, like the point-and-click easily beat them solution, like I have had when I had Gyrocopters with ammunition. So in one sense, like, these are really decisive now that I can't kill them. But would they have been decisive earlier on? It's hard to say, especially because I didn't necessarily have my Correlers or Handgunners quite as pushed forward, so I would have had a lot more time to react. And I was microing them a lot more earlier on in the fight when they mattered. Like, missile units late game don't matter as much in a certain sense. Pulling these Correlers back to the sort of ball here, but my opponent popping used his healing potion. His general, like, is holding out really, really well, all things considered. And the balance of power bar is actually pretty even, which is kind of ridiculous in all honesty, but yeah, I don't know. Slams into me with these Chaos Knights with Lances. Gonna deal some pretty big damage. What I'm gonna eventually do, once we get a good opportunity, is actually charge them with the Gyrocopters. And the reason that we're going to do this is that the Gyrocopters stop him from doing these hit-and-run tactics, which he's up to right now. We're currently just sort of mashing into these Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons, but that Chaos Sorcerer with the Lore of Fire is going to come in. Chaos Sorcerer is actually pretty good in these sort of situations, surprisingly, but what we're going to do is disengage with our Gyrocopters. And we just need something fast to chase these guys, and basically what's going to happen is every time he tries to do a pull-out, he gets harassed and attacked by the Gyrocopters, taking pretty bad damage the entire time. So it's a good way to stop this from happening. Got standard die coming out from my opponent. And his general is just getting his shit pretty wrecked here. He's got lots of Thanes on him. One of the Thanes is broken, but that's fine. General's on him. Lots of little axes and so on and so forth. So yeah, he's charged in again. I think this is about the time where I charge in with my Gyrocopters here. And he hasn't really been able to pull out quite as effectively this time with these guys with Lances. So yeah, just as he's trying to pull out, my Gyrocopters pull in. And they're going to start harassing these guys as they try to leave. They're sort of stuck on the Dwarves just a little bit as well, which is causing them to take more damage as they try to pull out. But as well, they can't really bully their way through Gyrocopters because the unit mass on Gyrocopters is too high. So my guys don't get pushed around when they try to exit. and at the same time I'm dealing this sort of whirly damage consistently to these guys from the rear, and you can see that that's causing them to flee, and their general has also broken. The Chaos Sorcerer with Fire has lost against those Longbeards, and we've managed to win a match there. So, yeah, this one was pretty close in some ways. Like, I think it could have been a lot closer if he had brought that cavalry in, but surprising how much balance of power comes from, like, a general and a unit of knights. It's kind of ridiculous, but I think we've settled into a pretty good sort of style for dwarves for this tournament. I think we'll be sticking to it to a certain extent, adjusting just depending on which army we're against, of course. But anyway, let's get on to the next match. Okay, so here we are for our second match. I'm playing as the beastmen. We're up against the Empire. I've got 5 units of Gores, 1 unit of Gores with shields. I probably should have gone all Gore Herd with shields, honestly, but I'm actually theorizing that the Gore Herd with shields, if you give them 100 points worth of veterancy, is probably just outright better in every way compared to the Gore Herd. But the Gore Herd has that Vanguard deployment that I never use. I think that's what they're paying for. So, in addition to them, we've got 2 units of Minotaurs. We've got 3 units of these Ungore Raiders. We've got Malagor the Dark Omen, 2 Gorbals, no upgrades, no potions. We've got 4 units of Ungore Spearmen, and that basically is it. So, the thing about Empire is that you never quite know what you're going to be up against. In this case, we've got a unit of Outriders. We've got a Steam Tank. We've got a big old line of Empire Spearmen, which I don't know if they're a great investment in this sort of situation. We've got 2 units of Empire Knights. We've got a unit of Handgunners. 2 units of Handgunners, in fact. A unit of Crossbowmen, the Light Wizard, the General of the Empire, and 2 units of Halberdiers. So, I think he's suspecting tons and tons of monsters, but I can't really afford to take tons of them. The 2 Gorbals, however, and the 2 Minotaurs is enough to really justify a lot of spears. It's just that, to a certain extent, you counter them with more missile units to a certain extent in Demigryph Knights, I find. But, yeah, it's hard to say. Looks like Shem's Burning Gaze, Phos Protection, and Net of Amantok, and some other thing that I don't really remember since I don't use the Lore of Light that often. Now, the Steam Tank here is going to be a real asshole to kill. It only has speed 50 though, and that's actually pretty important. The reason being that I've got speed 56 on the Minotaurs, and this is extremely important because that gives me the opportunity to run into the Steam Tank with the Minotaurs and actually just batter it to death. And it can't escape them very easily. So at this point in time, we're pulling at the Cygor. I'm sort of considering, do I want to like just sort of let him run through his ammunition a little bit? Do I want to fire some shots? What we're going to end up doing here to a certain extent is firing a couple shots. He's taking shots at my Cygor with his Steam Tank there. We're going to be able to counter these Outriders with our Ungore Raiders. To a certain extent, you can see that these guys have suddenly popped into existence and ambushed the Outriders, giving me an opportunity to deal some damage to them. I think that I have not fired a single shot off with my Cygor because he keeps getting hit by cannonballs, which is stun locking him, so I decide, you know, I really better attack here. So we start heading forward. I've got my my Minotaurs here just ready to go and attack. We finally got a shot off. We managed to peg off like a third of a unit of spearmen there, basically. Now, the thing is that my infantry do swarm through spearmen pretty well. The reason that I swarm through these spearmen so well, and not Bretonnian ones, of course, is that I maintain my charge bonus with infantry against the Empire spearmen. Whereas if I was up against Bretonnian spearmen, I would not get to maintain my charge bonus. Steam Tank's actually doing a much better job dealing damage to these guys in melee combat than I really would have expected. I didn't think that it would really deal any damage to these sorts of units, but yeah, it's dealing quite a bit. Not like a ton or anything, but getting some shots off with our Ungore Raiders, kept them around just to sort of shy away the Outriders, which I knew would go after my Minotaurs. But our other Ungores are firing at these missile units here. We're putting a Traitor King down on this area here. We want these archers gone, because they're slightly more deadly. My Gore Herd don't really have a great angle of attack anywhere, but we are doing a pretty good job here. Now, General of the Empire over here is going to turn this fight in his favor to a certain extent. Like, my opponent's still holding cavalry in reserve, which is usually a good idea, especially because I'm starting to have to commit a few of my Ungore Raiders here, or Ungore here. But we've still got sort of like Gorbals on flank security here. One of them's going to try and run around and maybe get to these gunners, but the gunners are getting shot at now by some other stuff. Gonna run this guy past these halberds, but I think he gets caught, so I stopped paying attention to him a little bit, because he's basically screwed. Not much friendly fire in this game, honestly. You can see the effect of those handgunners against these sort of things. So yeah, these guys are going to pull into my backline here a little bit. I've got Ungor Raiders that are able to help here. But at this point in time, I'm not too concerned, honestly. We've broken through the steam tank, we've broken through here, so we can get around his flank on this side instead. And we are charging in with a bunch of these units that are capable of dealing a lot of damage here. I think that we switch the Cygor over to these cavalry here. Get net of Amatox, but we're already in melee, so that doesn't matter. Still firing some shots along this side here. Yeah, big misses from our thing there. Charge to the rear of our Gore herd, they just pull straight through the Ungor Spearman herd. This is why I don't usually worry about flankers that much, because they're just going to pull through anyway. It's not going to help. But this does mean that I'm going to lose this flank here. But my opponent has lost this flank and the center, so that worked out pretty okay for me. General of the Empire is really... I'm not sure what's causing his General of the Empire to be so worried about this. Like, he should still be pretty okay in terms of morale and stuff like that, but apparently he's just completely screwed, according to his morale bar. So he routs at, like, he's at fairly low morale, but, like, at the same time, yeah, it's recovering, so I do believe he rallies, but, like, at the same time, I'm wondering why the hell his morale is so low in the first place. Might have been too many routing units near him in this case. So he rallies, he's going to rally up a bunch of other units along with him. These units I need to get back into the fight here to a certain extent, but at the same time I'm also not too concerned. Gorbel over here probably needs to get into the Knights, but we're able to disengage some of our Ungor Raiders from this ball here. One of our Ungor Raider units is still stuck in it, but that's fine. General of the Empire finding a Gore herd. Gore herd will very badly lose that fight. I start running these units to start cleaning up some of these units that are around here, because I think that we have enough over here, but I'm probably actually wrong in that assessment. Like, I thought we had enough units around here to probably win this fight decisively, but I'm not too sure about that now. Looking in retrospect, I think that if he had cycle charged his knights here, it's possible that he could have won this fight, especially now that his general's in it. It's hard to say, though, for sure. But that these knights all start routing relatively early. You can sort of see why they have such low morale, though, because the army losses are really starting to swing things in my favor. And at this point in time, the General of the Empire also routes and shatters, so... yeah, he got one flank, but I was able to push through the center and the other flank, which worked out pretty well for me. I think that, like, running the rear line security just doesn't really help as much as it probably should. Oops, hold on a second, my phone... Well, we'll get to the next match, but my phone is ringing here. Alright, and we are back. So this one, we're playing as Chaos. We're up against the beastmen. I'm not trying anything new in this one. I'm simply taking the stuff that I'd learned from previous games. We're using a few units from the previous ones. A little bit of Marauder Horsemen. We've got our big old lineup of Forsaken here. Got a unit of Chaos Trolls with armor here, which is a little bit new for me. We've got 2 units of regular Marauders. Got 3 units of the Halberdiers. We got our Chaos Lord on the Dragon here. And we've got a Fire Sorcerer, so... pretty traditional kind of stuff here. It is a little bit different for me to have a Chaos Lord on the Dragon. I don't normally take those in these matches, but I think that that's going to be a little bit pretty standard regardless. It's not a huge change or a huge difference, it's just that Beastmen don't really have any counter to air. We've got a Cygor over here that we're going to be up against. They're going to be pulling up another one. We've got 2 units of Minotaurs. These are the ones with great weapons. Of course, there's the 2 Gorbels, the Malagor Dark Omen over there. They've got a unit of Chaos Warhounds back there. They've got like 6 units of Gore Herd with shields, and Gore Herd, it's sort of a mix. I think it's just to fill out the requisite points. So the shields obviously are going to be pretty useless against Chaos, because I don't really have any missile weapons other than these 2 units of Marauder Horsemen, but still, it's something. Anyway, we're going to sort of start advancing towards our opponent here. He's got lots of artillery, so I need to do this pretty quickly. Of course, also got these Ungor Raiders here. I think I forgot to mention them. Ungor Raiders, only 1 unit's not going to really make a huge difference in terms of strategy or anything like that. We're going to try and get close enough to start chucking some rocks at these, or some javelins at these Cygors. However, we get clipped by the Cygor, which deals really good damage to my Marauder Horseman. He is dealing quite a bit of damage to my Forsaken, but Forsaken are actually tough and scary enough that I can just sort of like run into these Gore Herds, even with the damage I've taken. Now, the rest of my units are so much slower than my Forsaken that they're just sort of slowly bringing up the rear. They've clipped my Chaos Marauders here as well now, but Yeah, like, look how much slower the rest of the Chaos line is compared to the Forsaken. And this is why Forsaken are such a good thing against artillery-heavy forces. If I had just taken all Forsaken or something like that, we could have been in their lines by now, and it would have been much more efficient than having to wait for my slower units here. I do end up just charging these units in. We don't have to wait until my units are, like, all the way here, but we do have to worry about these Minotaurs with the great weapons, and we also have to worry a little bit about the Gorbals back here, but we are going to get off some shots with our Marauder Horsemen, deal a little bit of damage to these Goreherd. They did turn around, so they didn't get their shield bonus as well here, which helps us out just a little bit. Chaos Warriors Halberds getting plastered by these artillery shots. And this is the big downfall for Chaos Warriors. This is why they're so crap, because they're going to take tons and tons of damage on the approach to pretty much any faction. Even Vampire Counts could deal a lot of damage. It's not safe for me to go air game against Vampire Counts, so they can just fly like Manfred von Karstein over in front of them and just hit them with some sort of spell, and I'd take tons of damage, and there's nothing I could do about it as I'm trying to get closer. But in any event, we kind of got our like Chaos Marauders over here, trying to sort of run a kind of interruption here. These Minotaurs over here as well. We're at the point, though, where our forces are all close enough together that we can go ahead and charge in. Got Chaos Trolls coming in the front here. They are armored Chaos Trolls, so they can deal pretty good damage to these Goreherd, and they don't take very much damage in return. So they're going to do a nice shock charge into those Goreherd. Goreherds are not going to countercharge, but we are going to get a countercharge from the Minotaurs with great weapons over here. We're coming around the flanks pretty hard on both sides. We're going to get a good hit with the Forsaken into this unit of Goreherd with shields, and that's going to be pretty devastating as well, because they're trying to run away, and my unit is faster than these Goreherd. So this is going to give our Marauder Horsemen plenty of time to get away from that. It's also going to give us time to shred through this Goreherd. He's starting to fire a little bit into that combat there. Chaos Dragon is going to come into combat here. We're going to get some buffs down here as well. My Fire Wizard is keeping well away from this, but you can see here, broken through the Goreherd over here. This is going to give me an opportunity to wrap through this flank a little bit here. Over here, Halberds have finally made it into combat. They're going to try and get onto the Cygors if they can. They have to break through a little bit more before they can, but it's not going to be too long before they do. Marauder Cavalry should actually be coming into the fight pretty soon, but you can see that I've sort of torn through his support troops, and now we're coming into the ball, and this is going to be pretty bad for my opponent here. I do believe he still has his Chaos Warhounds. They're a lot less relevant than the earlier fights there, but they are still going to be something. So Marauder Horsemen going to start chucking their spears right into this Cygor, and like they're so good in these sort of situations. And it's so depressing that they are, because they're so much crappier than any other archer. Can you imagine if I had an actual proper archer unit? Anyway, we're going to do a quick charge into the midst of here, get rid of these Minotaurs with great weapons. They're retreating already, but I want to get rid of them as much as possible. We're going to put down some more buffs down here, and this is going to help our units. I think he hit his own Gorbal there a little bit, but he's still doing fine. This ball here is just off the field at this point, basically. He's down one Cygor. We want to sort of finish it off to a certain extent, but he's bringing in a lot of rallied troops here. That's going to be a bit problematic for me. We are still firing our javelins off at this retreating Cygor. We want it to shatter, or we want it to die. We can't leave it at the sort of state that it's in, but we're going to keep away with our unit as well here to a certain extent. We're getting into melee combat now with the Halberds into the Cygor, and that's going to go really poorly for him. Over here, this Gorbal is fending off quite a few units. He's using a healing potion, which, you know, pretty good idea there. Chaos Warhounds fighting Chaos Marauders. The Chaos Marauders are actually pretty crap, so I'm not even sure they're going to win that fight. But, yeah, look at all these sort of reinforcing units that are coming into this fight here. It's going to make it really hard for my Chaos Warriors and Halberds to properly do this, but Chaos General coming into the Ungor Raiders, and that's going to be way more than they can deal with here. And this Cygor is still getting plastered by these Marauder Horsemen. We need some reinforcements down here, though. We are getting Cascading Firecloak and Flaming Sword of Ruin down on these guys, though, so they're going to be able to deal some pretty hefty damage to these Minotaurs with great weapons. Getting a unit Forsaken as well into Malagor, and they're pretty tough for Malagor to deal with. At this point in time, we're mostly concerned about dealing with my opponent's tougher units. My Trolls rallied like ages ago, but not bringing them in. Charge into Malagor with Chaos Lord. It's going to be a lot of damage to them. They're piling in against this little ball here, and despite the fact that they've done really good damage here, they are going to go down just from the sheer amount of concentration of forces that my opponent's putting down on them. These Minotaurs with great weapons, though, not going to be able to withstand this sort of fight here. They're going to start fleeing again. bit of a route there as well. You can see that these Chaos Warhounds do indeed beat my freaking Chaos Marauders. This is so ridiculous. They're going to charge into my Chaos Sorcerer, and it's not necessarily a great matchup for the Chaos Sorcerer, but it's also not really that bad. Over here, our Marauders are starting to clear off the last of the Cygor over here, and a lot of his units just are out of the fight at this point in time. Malagor is retreating from the Chaos Lord, so without their general, like, their morale is going to start failing pretty quickly, and you can see that their Gorbel over here does break. The other Gorbel, everything sort of shatters all at once there. So yeah, in this particular case, my opponent was relying heavily on that artillery. It worked out pretty well for him. They did a lot of damage, but at the same time I was able to get around and deal good counter damage to those Marauder Horsemen, which is really sad because, like, normally you counter those things with better archers or something like that, but it worked out okay in the end. The rest of it, the Forsaken are just too much of a step up over the Goreherd, and the Chaos Warriors with Halberds, as crappy as they are, can still beat a Cygor. I've noticed they lose against, like, dragons and giants and stuff like that, but yeah, like, the front line of beastmen in this rule setup is just too fragile. They need, like, the really weird front lines that they get when you're using different composition rules, where they don't have to take rare slots, where you don't have to take Cygor necessarily, just to fill the rare requirement. But anyway, let's go ahead and check out our final match. Okay, so here we are for our final match. I'm playing as Bretonnia. I do think that Bretonnia is probably one of my best factions out of the bottom four, so hopefully this will go pretty okay for me. In this one, we're actually checking out to see if the Damsel is still viable in this one, instead of doing the hero spam. We've got ourselves 2 Pegasus Knights. We've got ourselves a pretty long lineup of 7 Spearmen-at-Arms here with shields. We've got 3 of the Men-at-Arms with polearms. We've got 2 units of Knights of the Realms here, 4 Peasant Archers. We've got the Lord on the Griffin, and we've got a Damsel on foot there. So we're up against the Undead. They've got 2 units of Crypt Ghouls. They've got 5 units of the Skeleton Spearmen. They've got 3 units of regular Graveguard. They've got the Corpse Cart with the Unholy Lodestone. They've got Strigoi Ghoul King, the Mortis Engine, a White King, and they've got a unit of Blood Knights back there. So, pretty good army composition in some respects, but also on the other hand, not really a huge amount of frontline. The one nice thing is that the Graveguard are very good against Bretonnian infantry. Not a ton that the Bretonnians can do against that sort of thing. But as you would expect, he's allowed me to have complete and total air dominance. You typically are not going to want to have anything in the air against Bretonnia, especially with these rules in effect, simply because my opponent is taking up all of his valuable slots to counter my air game, and he would probably end up losing in an air fight, simply because of the variety of different good things that the Bretonnians have to let them win an air fight. So we're starting to open up a little bit with our archers. It's not really too important in many respects, but we're just going to wait until the Mortis Engine shows up, because I've got really nothing else to shoot at here, no Cryptors or anything like that. Dealing some pretty good damage to these Crypt Ghouls, though, which is pretty okay. The nice thing about them is that they don't really have a charge bonus, so it's not like they really care about the fact that Bretonnians cancel that, so they'll do fine regardless. The Mortis Engine is in range. I think I switched targets about now, and that's going to be a good way for me to deal some damage. It's actually charging into the front of the spears, which is a little bit of an odd choice there. I would like to fire at something else, but realistically there's nothing more important to fire at right now. We're using Curse of the Midnight Wind here from the Damsel, and you can see actually just how effective Archer Fire is at dealing with the Mortis Engine. A bit weird in all honesty. He's popping up the Cryptors here to try and deal with all of my archers and stuff like that. We're going to countercharge with our Lord into that, and then we're going to move back our archers so that they can fire at those Cryptors pretty effectively. He did charge cleanly into my Grail Knights, or Knights of the Realm there. I wasn't really paying attention to them very much. We've got sort of rear charge set up to deal with him as well, though. But we're going to bring our other unit of Knights across here to try and deal with this. All 4 of our archers managed to get out of this fight relatively okay, but back here things are a little bit desperate. We got a unit of Men-at-Arms, polearms here trying to hold the line. We got our general down in here. The Damsel's basically in there as well, but they got the White King, they got the Strigoi Ghoul King, they got a unit of Graveguard. The Corpse Cart, Unholy Lodestone is also coming into this fight. This unit of Blood Knights is trying to come across and get out of this fight here because it's in melee combat with infantry. But I managed to do a countercharge with the Knights of the Realm here. Unfortunately, I do lose a pretty much full upgraded unit of Spearmen-at-Arms. I'm getting hit by Doom and Darkness there. But we do a charge with all of our Pegasus Knights into the Corpse Cart. I want to get rid of it. It's just because it's clearing out their backline a little bit too much for me to handle. Blood Knights back here are going to be a little bit tricky to deal with in some respects, but over here are Knights of the Realm, stuck in combat with Spearmen for some damn reason. I'm not really paying attention enough to that, I suppose. But we're holding the center here pretty effectively. Arrows coming down on the Blood Knights, they're going to go down pretty quickly. And you can see that they're just about out of the fight. They come into the Pegasus Knights, but it's pretty much too late for them. Down 8 men left, and they're crumbling, so we do have to pull out of this combat here. I do think he uses an invocation on these guys. Yep, that is going to pull them back into the fight just a small amount, but you can see that they're getting killed just as fast as they are coming back to life. Getting another charge in here, and we can see lots of Bretonnian units rallying into the fight here. I do believe my general is now in the back of these units over here. Curse of the Midnight Wind coming down again. Spearmen arms are doing a pretty good job of things. And yeah, these Blood Knights, because of that constant fire, do poof, even though they had the invocation down on them. We're doing okay holding here. Like, this is actually not that bad, but it's not really enough to continue on. But firepower coming down against these Graveguard, if I recall. Rear charges coming in from these Pegasus Knights. And the combination of just charges from different locations is going to be really rough for my opponent to deal with. Pegasus Knights actually do have a good shock charge. It's enough to deal some pretty hefty damage to these sorts of units here. And he's not really fighting with this unit of Graveguard, so we're actually pulling back with our units. I just want to be able to fire at these units with my bows without having to commit my units, because I don't want to cause more friendly fire than I have to. My general getting a little bit sacked here by this White King. White Kings are actually very, very good at assassinating generals. But Pegasus Knights just sort of circling around like doofs. I think it's because a couple of them are stuck on the ground or whatever. But we're dropping Common Cassandora here, I think, is what's happening. Very long cast time. I accidentally hit one of my Pegasus Knights, which is actually kind of hard to do, but yeah, so we plaster some Skeleton Spearmen with the Common Cassandora. There's no real great targets for my spells at this point in time, but Curse of the Midnight Wind is still on cooldown. These Graveguard probably need to get into a fight. Like, they're just getting mown down by missile fire and not really contributing to anything. But over here, we've gotten a rear charge into these Skeleton Spearmen. That's going to cause them to crumble. This is going to give us a few troops that are freed up that can go help these Spearmen over here, who are stuck fighting the Strigoi Ghoul King and the White, which not really great for me. But over here you can see that all of my Peasant Bowmen just spontaneously sort of... like, just something just immediately kills them. I'm not 100% sure what actually did that, but they were at pretty decent health. Suddenly they're not, and they end up retreating. So my units over here get a bit surrounded by these Graveguard, and they retreat as well. These Graveguard, however, out of the fight pretty much. We still got the one unit of Peasant Bowmen who are firing away. They're pretty much out of ammunition. In fact, all of our units of Peasant Bowmen are pretty low on ammunition. We are getting some good charges here, though, and that's going to be helpful. Good charge here from the Lord is coming in there, but he's getting pretty pounded in retaliation for it by this Strigoi Ghoul King. Not really my best charge there. Put us a little bit too close to the Strigoi Ghoul King, I think this is Invocation. No, this is another Common Cassandora, actually. He sort of runs away from it. I actually hit my own Spearman a little bit too much with it, but it's not too bad. My opponent's army is so crumbling at this point in time that there's not a whole lot left as far as that goes. My Spearman arms here are sort of standing still. I think it's because they count as engaged currently, but we could definitely be moving them a little bit better here. I'm not sure if my Lord has another potion or not. I'm pretty sure he doesn't at this point in time, but at this point in time my opponent is really just down to the dregs of it. He's got basically his White King and his Strigoi Ghoul King. Now, his Strigoi Ghoul King is going to take 1,000,000 years to kill, even though I've got quite a lot of army left compared to him. Like, the points value of what I have left is a lot higher, and the number of troops that I've got is a lot higher. So all of that together should be doing a little bit more here. But yeah, we're not getting anywhere even close to even results here. Going to go ahead and charge down on the White King, try and take it out really quickly, and we're able to deal some pretty big damage to it very, very fast. And you can see that it's going to go down pretty quickly here. Lots of our knights piling in on the fight as well. But the Strigoi Ghoul King has taken like 0 damage. It's still regenerating quite quickly. It is a very high regeneration type unit though. Foeseeker Bloodlust on this guy. We want to get our general away from that Bloodlust, so he's popped himself away from the White King. But yeah, again, the White King is also not dying. We are taking a Spirit Leech here, so this is where I decide I'm going to have to start committing my general to these charges very, very quickly. My opponent loses the White King, and that doesn't even flinch the balance of power bar, so there's something clearly broken about that, because I think that this is not a situation where my opponent has even forces to me. I would just argue. But Strigoi Ghoul King is starting to run out of regeneration eventually, but we're just doing cycle charging with our general so that we can get as much damage from him as possible before the Strigoi Ghoul King does finally run out of regeneration, and before he finally does get another Spirit Leech against my Lord, because if that happens, then we're going to be in some serious deep trouble. But yeah, we come in for another cycle charge there, and this causes him to disintegrate, so that is going to finally end that there, and we finally see the balanced power bar moving, so yeah, the Damsel I still think is one of the weakest mages out there, but I think that Curse of the Midnight Wind is meaningful. It's just that, is it worth losing all those paladins that could have really helped me out there? I'm not 100% sure about that. I definitely think that the paladins are a very strong element to the Bretonnian army if you're doing this sort of rule set, and maybe it's just stronger than simply having Curse of the Midnight Wind, which I think is a relatively good buff, but that's all the mage has. On the other hand, I could probably have afforded to gone for a foot general and then gone for a bunch of Curse of the Midnight Wind and then gone for a couple paladins in addition to that. That might have been a possibility, but yeah, maybe we'll think about that a little bit more later. Anyway, that's this series. Less experimenting because a little bit more of what I know about these factions and these limitations is becoming more and more concrete. But yeah, anyway, I hope you found this video enjoyable, and of course, as always, I hope to see you all next time.